Hello there, I'm Ian Charles of Wizards. I'm here with Steve Cassidy. Steve, do you want to give a brief intro to who you are?
My brief intro is that I'm the editorial fellow for a range of computer titles. There's PC Pro, which sits in your local newsagents still, and a spread of web titles including Cloud Pro, IT Pro, and a thing called Alpha.com.
Right, and we're here today to talk about what an interim IT director, what a fractional IT director does. So, well, who is an interim or who is a fractional IT director?
Apart from me, it's a simple answer. It's a curious role, and that's why it's worth making a video about it. There are an awful lot of businesses who deal with IT largely as an operational matter.
Right.
So the logic is that their IT director, common is finance director, and what they actually have as people who are engaged in technology is an IT manager.
Right.
And they peg the role as being outside the boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then there may be hierarchy on it. They can either be running contracts, or they can be running their own local staff, or doing whatever they want to do. Those businesses frequently miss a whole load of perspective about what IT strategy is.
Right.
And whether strategy demands really quite immediate access or action. Sorry. Now,
so what distinction are you drawing there between strategy and tactics?
It comes largely from the magazine, funnily enough, although this particular industry has arisen without our blessing. In a classic FD as CIO environment, they'll read something in PC Pro and they'll dash off a letter saying, what nonsense, because they don't want to react, they don't want to spend the money if they can avoid it.
Right.
And they don't see the transformations coming, they don't see the completely different industries working in different ways.
Right.
So, as IT has become so much more important to the running of most of those businesses, so the lack of that strategic mindset produces more and more strains, and those strains come out in areas that are almost kind of water cooler moments, is the defining environment there. So you find an awful lot of businesses where the IT manager guy is a stress case study, grinds his teeth, shouts at his users, he doesn't get good appraisal. You can go through a whole load of HR driven concerns, and there is a competitor title to all of my titles which takes that tone and gets up in the morning with a sneer and writes about all the new technology with a sneer, and then writes about the developments in industry and sneers again, and they're very successful. I don't knock them in publishing terms, but it shows you what's going on with the mood of those businesses, that they strike that note and they get that right. It's the job of the IT director to take that kind of water cooler feedback and go back to the board and say, look, you're not getting performance because you're not understanding what this guy's trying to do for you. Mm-hmm. You're afraid of the role that he has in looking at your information.
Yep.
And a series of little interruptions, a series of little mood changes that hit your IT manager are an indication of a problem in the boardroom. So you have to take that back to the board in the boardroom.
Right.
So generally, if I get the chance to do interim or fractional IT director work, I will book myself into their board meeting.
Right.
And interrupt it a lot.
Do they take kindly to this? Is this you're a stranger in these parts? What do you know about their business?
Haven't you seen any of those chef shows where the chef turns up and the restaurant's rubbish,
mm-hmm.
but the guy still asks them to come along?
Right.
Right. That's the environment.
But
very much.
But the chef then the restaurateur knows he's running a failing business.
Yes, but there's still a nice 15-minute segment between the adverts where they have a Barney and there's a bit of throwing of crepes or whatever. And then everybody's great friends after the next commercial break. Yeah. Penetrating through that bit of that role takes a bit longer when it comes to IT, because you've actually got to get through to people who didn't think they had a dog in that fight.
Right.
And that even comes down to people who say, oh, is it all broken again? Is it all down again? They're very tone-driven conversations.
Right.
And the sneaky change, the reason why this role has now become really interesting and I enjoy it a lot, is that all of those people know that IT has become very progressively, very quietly, more and more vital.
Right. To the business.
Yes. So they want to say, we make wheelbarrows. No, they're not. They're running a wheelbarrow website with 20 other websites hanging off the bottom of it for what you put in the wheelbarrow. So the value and the process have become much more IT centric in industries that find themselves caught out by that.
And as a wheelbarrow manufacturer, you've still got to buy the bits that go together, and that's all going to arrive on time in the right order.
Yeah, so all the ERP space stuff is meat and potatoes around what IT directors need to think about doing. Getting people to understand the pace of change in different parts of the industries they're buying from is another one. How many small businesses do you know who have a single contract for their cell phone and their telephone system?
None. It's unknown.
Because they've realised that they want to replace the cell phones every year and they want to replace the main telephone system every
15 years.
Easily.
Yeah.
And that mismatch is enough to get everybody screeching to halt and go, well, why are we doing it this way? Why are we doing it that way? And where's my mobile email gone? Because my integration depends now vitally on that without ever spending the money on it.
Right.
And the IT director's job is to go and put his finger up and say, look, you've got a mismatch.
So how much should they? I've heard figures bandied around of a business needs to spend about 6% of its turnover on IT. Is that a fair number?
No, I think that's biased towards the IT sector.
You mean?
I think it's businesses who wouldn't even exist without an IT environment. If they are wheelbarrow men, they can probably get away with doing a little bit less.
Yeah.
And again, one would expect the IT director to have a breadth of industry experience and say, well, you're allowed to be above the line, you're allowed to be below the line.
Right.
And my most persistent argument with that whole piece of presentation is is how they engage with the cloud.
Right.
Huge numbers of those types of businesses think that the cloud is a 100% all or nothing proposition.
Right.
It's not.
So yeah, but there are issues around the cloud, aren't there? I mean, things like where you are geographically, have you got the bandwidth? Can you afford the bandwidth? How reliable is your internet connection? All of which we can help with, by the way.
You would say, of course, yeah. And the issue in that space is really half of it is golf club driven. They don't want to be sitting there with their buddies saying, do you know what, we're all in the cloud now, and have no idea whether they should be, they shouldn't be.
Right.
Particular customer has got half a terabyte, I forget how many files it is, it's something like 2 or 3 million files. When I first turned up, it took them 25 minutes to even enumerate that on their server as it stood.
Right.
And they kept looking at cloud packages, and the price for that amount of data was staggering. And they said, well, how come the industry's done this to us? And 3 NAS boxes later, everybody's calm, it enumerates in about 20 seconds, and there is a mismatch between the scale of the problem that you find very often in those environments and the cost of the answer. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily get better just by spending more money in the same focused way. And a lot of those guys doing their best, trying to do the IT manager job, are blown to bits mentally by suddenly finding that they're the linchpin of all of the pressures in the business.
Right.
And it's not fair for them to be left running that with various people who are not IT experienced judging their performance.
Well, then it's just up or down, isn't it? It's just can I get my emails? Can I?
It is just up or down. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Whereas what they really want is it up? Is it down? If it isn't, what's Plan B? How do I get to Plan B? Where's the emergency call? They're now starting to think about. Sorry about this. I hate this already, but it's being used, so I'm going to go there. It's the cyber resilience thing.
Yeah.
It's not just have you got two of everything?
Yeah.
It is what is your defence in depth of reduced capability and increased, and how are you going to do that?
So in the event that you get a toilet leak on the server, what do you do
What's
now?
really going to happen now?
As the building, what happens when the building burns down, etc.
And it's vital that people have a reassurance plan when it's not their main business. Actually, it's vital when it is their main business. Quite a lot of people running cloud services on their own don't know what's going to happen on the first day after the hard disk didn't start.
Right.
So there's a bunch of those sort of things that are the field of the interim IT director coming in and saying, you've got to do these things in this order.
Yeah.
Or hire a full-time director because you're overusing.
There's another side to that, of course, isn't there? Which is the fact that there is an issue about can you afford, what can you afford, and there is the whole essence of the interim IT director, the fractional IT director, is you're delivering your expertise, received from years and years across various sectors, through you can't afford a full-time IT director.
That's right.
Therefore, you only need one for 2 days a month.
Yeah, but and what's more from my perspective, and think about that. First of all, there's a very selfish perspective, which is it's all very good for background understanding of industry trends, and it makes my questions to Mr. Michael Dell and all his similar sort of levels of people much sharper. And I take great pride in the fact that you can see them feeling the punch, because I know that that's a pain coming in from those kind of relationships.
It's you as a journalist.
Yeah, I prefer to say columnist, because journalists, we have issues with. Columnists got a bit more reputation. Anyway, that's one side of it from my perspective. The other side is that generally your interim IT director tends to have an impact.
Right.
The ripples have got to actually settle out. You can't, if you're there and you're booked in for 5 days a week, you tend to unfold a whole load of stuff the organisation can't absorb.
Right.
It's far better to put it in, let the ripples die down, come back.
So how long does your relationship with the organisation last? What's the life of an interim IT director?
Probably a bad example. I always think that there are 3 phases and each one is nearly 3 years.
Right. So realistically, it's actually the same as the 9-year cycle, in the same way as maybe an IT director would be seen anyway.
Yeah, I think they're getting longer because the people who've actually got an IT director are very much bought into the value of the post.
Right.
And those guys are mutating into CIOs.
Right.
Okay.
The difference?
But CIOs don't really care who runs the computer that their query is on.
Right. Hence the cloud.
It's information.
Yeah.
Chief Information Officer. So I think you should probably expect a classic single-purpose fractional IT director visit to last a couple of years.
Right.
If it only lasts 6 months, you picked the wrong guy, or there wasn't really a problem. Right? If it's longer than that, maybe you ought to have one. It becomes the conundrum.
But then you're a fractional IT director, and what's wrong with 2 days a month?
Wandering in and out. I know. Let me finish that whole observation, that whole point. A lot of the time, people are used to the idea, and one of the titles of this is interim. People are used to the idea that sometimes people go and then come, someone else will come in. Interim IT director started from a really interesting place, which is interim finance director.
Right.
And there are legal issues around having an FD and firing your FD and whatever those processes are, or parting company, good or bad. And the interims were there as very much stood off to one side from all of the infighting and talking about what the accounting business wanted them to do.
Right.
There's no structure that looks like that in IT.
Right.
And it's emerged from demand. This isn't something where an agent has sat down thinking, well, I want to stimulate a market that doesn't exist.
Right.
The demand came first.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting sort of push versus pull distinction.
So what's the relationship of a fractional IT director with existing staff? What can he do with them and to them and for them? And
Do you know about what colour is my parachute?
No,
No. It's the world's largest self-published title. It's written by the Reverend Richard Nelson Bolles, who's an American Methodist preacher.
Right.
And it's how you job hunt.
Mm-hmm.
I've given away more copies of that book as an interim IT director than almost anything else.
Right.
Because very often, if there's dissatisfactions and there's things going on, or there is in fact under rewarding, the guy is perfectly good at what he's doing. I'm extremely proud that one of my guys from a junior position, who was a bolshy, difficult piece of work all the way through the relationship, now works for De Beers.
Right.
He's making more money than me. I know. Pride and jealousy evenly balanced. So there's a heavy element of looking at what the IT team looks like, and by that I also include the suppliers,
Right.
and having the freedom to say that one goes.
Right.
And
And the independence.
Yes, and very more often than not, if I give them the book, it's because I think they can do better. That's the punchline for the staff. It isn't that you're casting them out into the outer wilderness.
Right.
It is that they've been banging their head on the wrong table.
Right. They need a different time.
And they ought to be doing different things. In the case of the guy I'm thinking of, he was in a pure intellectual legal environment, and he liked being in a factory. He was an engineering factory kind of a person, and diamond crushing is good enough, right? He was really happy to go down that road, and that conversation was about appropriateness and fit. It wasn't about good or bad in any way. So you have to take that and acknowledge that the IT industry has got its own crazy personality types, as you know. And
Well,
to say about that.
Indeed, I think we've covered that elsewhere. Are there any standards for an IT director,
No more than there are standards for any other IT role.
or any other director role?
Isn't it that wasn't Ronnie Biggs a company director?
I never actually met him. I don't get what you heard.
But that's the point. The company director is the classic thing for career criminals sticking to passport.
Yes, nefarious activities.
So IT directors are no more or less regulated. I mean, there is a shadow cast over that in the shape of ITIL,
Right.
which is proceduralisation of IT behaviour. However, I'm looking at ITI in a very jaundiced way, because I think it represents a narrow time slice. I think it's how people reacted to probably Server 2003.
Right. Yes, I think that was when it
Around
started.
about then, when it needed managing.
Yeah.
And you can kick the tyres on it now and nothing goes wrong, and therefore an awful lot of the burden is misplaced.
Right.
But that's not how the history of regulation generally works.
No.
I expect that there will be somewhat more formal standards, but in industries that specialise in IT as their primary product.
Right.
If it's secondary product, that's interim IT director natural country, not at Amazon. If I told you I was the interim IT director at Amazon, do you know I was actually interim technical director in one particular place where my predecessor had been arrested. It's got to be that extreme before
For
it makes
what?
sense.
For what was he arrested for?
Let's not go there.
Okay.
This is an internet company, so let's not.
Right.
But they took him away. If you are ever arrested, incidentally, it's a hot tip. Don't leave your Gmail logged in, because then your successor can come in and read the whole story.
Right.
Those kind of extraordinary circumstances might mean you get interim directors in IT businesses.
Right.
Rest of the time, no. You're talking about good old, proper industries, hot metal and banging things and everything. Mm-hmm. And it's understanding the demands of those industries that makes the interim role gain value.
Right.
If you're just walking in and saying, "Well, that's not ISO compliant," missing the point completely.
Yeah, that's not really what you're for, is it? No. Okay, so interim IT director is a fluid role. It's actually a relatively long-term relationship.
Yes.
And it's about delivering to people who otherwise couldn't afford a full-time salaried member or member of staff on such a salary.
Correct. But I mean, and there are plenty of companies where non-execs do those kind of roles in other fields. So there's a kind of company formation precedent, and there is a when things go wrong precedent around the FD, interim FD role.
Right.
And it's kind of curious once you think about those issues, why it's taken this long for this sort of thing to emerge.
Well,
But here we are.
Here we are indeed.
Jolly good.
I think we're done there. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.